Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to show you how to remove a standard crank arm from a standard bottom bracket system. Now Holotech and other versions will work differently, but this is the kind of crank arm and bottom bracket system you're going to find on most bottom brackets for mountain bikes and hybrids, bikes that maybe have been around a few years or those that haven't cost you hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Anyway, usually you will have a nut here which requires a 14mm socket to remove, and other times you will then also have a different system which is typically one of these. Now this is because the thread itself is part of the bottom bracket, as in the spindle going through for the bottom bracket. For these, it's because the thread itself on the bottom bracket spindle is the female version and you have a bolt. So this is a nut, this is a bolt, one or the other will do the trick. But these need to be removed before the crank arm can be removed. So we'll do that now. Now it should be on fairly tight. So what I like to do is put a bit of pressure with this hand, pushing down onto the pedals. And at the same time, I'm going to be pushing down with the ratchet at the same time. So they're both going in opposite directions, which is ultimately going to be making this go lefty-loosey, anti-clockwise. It's not brilliant connection here for the ratchet, but there we go. It's just gone loose just there. And then we can take this whole thing out. Obviously with physics, if you find that actually things are too tight beyond the length of a standard ratchet, then you'll need to get a breaker bar or something just to extend that gap and increase the opportunity to remove. Anyway, now that's off, you can see there is a different type of thread inside the crank arm. Around the outside here, hopefully the video is showing a light enough picture that you can see these threads. What we need to do is to clean this out, just to make sure that what you're about to screw in isn't going to get caught up in grit and grime. So I'm going to do that quickly and then we'll return to the video. There we go, all done. I've also sprayed a bit of WD-40 in there as well, or you can use something as a similar product just to help the threads meet well and to enable things to move smoothly. Now is the time for you to install your crank arm remover, crank extractor. And the way it works is usually it's a two-part system. This first part of the threads, these meet the threads in here, and they are going to not make contact with anything but the crank arm. And then what's going to happen is, once it's been screwed in as far as it will go, this part will be screwed in by us, and through the middle will be a form of plunger post, and that is going to be pushing against this part here, the middle part, because that's not attached to this crank arm. That's attached to the spindle, and it's essentially going to be pushing through, and it's going to enable the crank arm to come away from its housing. Very clever, very, very clever system, but don't be put off, don't be scared. It's not that difficult to operate. What I'm going to do is bring the camera up slightly and down, and hopefully you'll get a better perspective. Here we go. So we're going to screw this in. This part has been removed almost entirely, and what I like to do is not to screw in straight away. If you back off, you might hear a slight click, but that will be the threads both meeting together, which will prevent you hopefully cross threading. The general rule of thumb, folks, is we don't force threads on here. So if things aren't going in smoothly, you either add more WD-40, perhaps even a bit of grease to help the threads work together, but we definitely don't force these threads in. So things really weren't going well here. I just couldn't get this thing turning well, and probably because of all the grit and grime, but I just didn't want to risk it. So I've added some grease here, some bike grease to these threads and to the threads in here, and I'm just going to see if things move in well. Oh, there we go, straight in. That's all the difference it needed. So as I say, don't force it, folks. More than likely, it's just going to be a bit gunked up, but it's just not worth risking it in case it's cross-threaded. Anyway, we're going to tighten this up, not massively, but we're just going to tighten it up so it has good contact with the inside of the crank arm, like that. And now it's time to screw this part in. Now this will be a bit stiff, but we're going to keep working this forwards, and you're going to have to put a fair bit of pressure. So off camera, I'm pushing down on both ends of here and the wrench as well, the spanner. But this is because it's now going to have to work against itself to pull the crank arm away. that nut we removed, or indeed the bolt if that's the case for you, had to be put in with loads of pressure to push the crank arm on. Now we're doing the reverse pressure to try and get it off. But just after it goes, which it is now, it will become easier. And that is now doing its job. Now you can't really see at that angle. Let's increase this angle for you and come down to this beautifully clean bike. And hopefully you will see the gap here increase as we tighten this part here that I've just moved, this bit here. Okay, keep an eye on it. There we go. You can see it pulling away, and you can even, with finger and thumb, even if they are covered in grease, that is just pulling it away now, and that is going to come away quite nicely. So there we go. That is how to remove the crank arm of a standard bike. And I would say that's about the end of the video, because on the other side, the drive side, the right hand side of the bike where the chain rings are, while that might look scary and intimidating, it's still exactly the same process. Get you on, this is a really long spindle, there we go. And off it comes. So you can see now the threaded part which the nut went on to begin with. As I say, with some spindles, these are going to be female, and this threaded bolt section is going to be actually what pushes the or secures the crank arm in the first place. So nut or bolt, exactly the same system. What we're going to do now is get on with everything else, but for you, you're done, and we are job done. That is how to remove the crank arm on a bike. Again, exactly the same on the other side. In terms of putting it back on again, I'll make that the extra part of this video, but you can sign off now if all you wanted to do was remove it. It would be a bit easy, wouldn't it, to say that putting it back on is just a complete reverse of removing, but it actually is, and without using this tool. So we're just going to take the pressure off this one. There we go. So that can now come off. That can be cleaned up and put back in your toolbox. For getting the crank arm back on, it's a very simple process, but just make sure that it is at the opposite angle to the opposite crank arm. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move this crank arm, this one, up so it's pointing at 12 o'clock. You'll see that this is moving in a corresponding fashion. So it's off camera, but this is now pointing to 12 o'clock, which means we're now going to put this one to 3 o'clock. This is really, really gross, so I'm just going to do this for the purpose of the video, and then I'm going to whip this off and give it a really good clean. So don't just bung it back on when you've got loads of crap and dirt on it. Okay, this is going back on. And as you see, it didn't just push on. There's still a hell of a distance to go. So this is where you would put the nut back on, and you would use your socket set to put this nut back on just as before. In terms of how much pressure, how much torque is required, you'll need to go on the internet and just double check that it's right. But it'll be, I'll put some figures up on your screen of what the torque is likely to be. If really you are in a rush and you're really old school, your argument might be that you'll just do it by touch. Well, you're welcome to. But one thing is certain, if this works loose, and if it's not correctly torqued, then this will slowly wobble, it will slowly work its way loose, and the moment this comes loose, it will never go back on again because you would have stripped the threads. So it's imperative, really important, that you torque this correctly. Anyway, have a look at the figures, go online if you need to, and that's the job. Thank you very much for watching. I'm going to give this a full-on clean because it's gross. I'm going to take this off again and do the job properly. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Please do look at my other videos. Don't go to the mechanics. With a few tools costing a few quid, you can do everything yourself. But for now, please like, please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.